Good afternoon, everyone who's joining us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Charlie's Facebook, wherever you may be in the virtual world today. This is our live 16th live episode of NeuroWomen Natter.
Oh,
16 months we've been doing this, Charlie.
yeah,
That's
I think,
amazing.
yeah, and we haven't even touched the surface of the topics that we could cover.
Absolutely not. And there is more to come, more to come. So today we are talking about people pleasing, perfectionism, and what's expected of us. Sometimes, as you know, as women, as people pleasers as well. But I get asked the question. So, today I want to talk about something that a lot of us know well. People pleasing and perfectionism, and how quietly, slowly they can lead to burnout. So, what is it? So, people pleasing isn't about being kind, it's about being afraid of disappointing others. Perfectionism is about having high standards of yourself, um, but it's also about feeling like you're never quite enough unless you're performing as well. And for me, it shows up as over preparing, second guessing emails, rewriting things that are already good enough to go, saying yes when my body is screaming, just don't do it, don't do it. Measuring my worth by how comfortable other people feel around me as well. And on the outside, it looks like competence, like I've got it all together, and the reliability that comes with that, and being easy to work with. But on the inside, it feels like a constant vigilance, like there's no switch off, like rest has to be earned, and it's never quite is. And I feel like I constantly have to be on the go. And in the corporate world, it was making sure that I was always instantly available on Teams, so nobody thought that I wasn't there or wasn't doing my work. And that kind of people pleasing and that self doubt of what other people think of you. And actually, when I look back now, I wasn't actually that important. That's what goes on in my own head. And over time, it takes its toll. And burnout doesn't always come from doing too much, it often comes from being someone you're not for too long. And I think for us, Charlie's, and that's about, the masking, sometimes having to shrink yourself to not be so big
Yeah,
in an audience, and holding yourself to a standard where it was never yours in the first place. Like trying to hold yourself to somebody who's neurotypical when you're not neurotypical, and that's the hardest part.
absolutely. Yeah,
And people pleasing and perfectionism is often rewarded. And I think we have that, we get that dopamine hit of being rewarded with, oh, you've done that so well, oh, thank you for doing that. And suddenly your body says, I can't do anymore.
yeah.
I just can't do it. Um,
I don't think it's an exclusively neurodivergent women thing, but most of us do seem to have it. And speaking as someone who's not only a neurodivergent woman and working mum, but also has a brother with a more complex profile and higher support needs than myself, I think that this is a pattern that started really, really early on in my life. And I'm sure you can relate to that as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about childhood in the past, where I probably would have done things in the playground that was asked of me that I really went against my values, but it was trying to fit in. And again, it's that people pleasing element of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Charlie, how has people pleasing or perfectionism shown up for you as a neurodivergent woman?
Yeah. So for me, I think it's probably in a fairly atypical way, even as a neurodivergent woman. And a lot of that is because I am a tomboy and because I always wanted to be rebellious. So it isn't so much about being the good girl all the time with me. It's way more about trying to impress people. I don't want everyone to like me. I want people to appreciate me and be impressed by me. And it sounds awful when I put it like that, and it's just it's quite hard for me to reconcile with, but I still do it even now, as a professional speaker. And I'm in the limelight on a big stage, and I'm getting the dopamine boost from all the people in the audience responding to what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, but with the band as well, and with things that I write, with my social media posts. But it's never about fitting a kind of neuronormative, cis normative image for me. It's kind of a different slant. And I think that a lot of that is to do with my experiences at school, where because I was clever, people would praise me for being intelligent and being clever, not recognizing my struggles when I was struggling with paying attention, for example, a subject I wasn't interested in. Or if there was a distraction out of the window, boys playing football is the classic one. I would always watch that rather than listening to the teacher. But for some reason, the bullies thought that I was like a clever clogs and a goody two shoes, and they called me square. So in Back to the Future, when Michael, what's his name? I'm so rubbish with names. When Michael J. Fox's character in Back to the Future, when someone calls him chicken, he has to immediately prove how brave he is. I'm just like that. If someone calls me good or a goody two shoes or a suck up or anything like that, I have to immediately be rebellious, and that's right back from childhood and those playground bullies. So I've always wanted people to be impressed with who I am and what I do and how I show up.
Yeah.
But I can tip very easily from wanting them to be happy and impressed with the meal I've cooked or something, to somebody says the wrong thing and I fly into a volcanic rage. So you've got to mix in a bit of rejection sensitivity dysphoria there as well. And to me, all of those kind of neuro traits, you can't neatly delineate them. They're all smushed together. So I've cooked a delicious meal and Sai says, can you finish cooking these potatoes? They're not crispy or something. And ingest even. And I have a volcanic meltdown. It won't be that one comment that's caused it, but the pressures that I've put on myself all day, all through my working day, when the kids have got back from school, while I'm cooking, while I'm serving up. And it can just take that one negative comment and it passes me past my ability to cope, and I boil over. So I find it really hard to distinguish that, to kind of work out whether that's perfectionism and validation seeking, or whether it's that rejection sensitivity dysphoria. But I see all of these characteristics in myself all the time.
So I've got kind of a different reflection on it, especially from a professional background. Being in a large organization for as long as I was, I look back and I actually think, because I wasn't known as the intelligent child when I was younger. I was known as the lazy learner, the person that probably wasn't good enough to go to university. I actually think once I got the opportunity that I did in an organization like that, I then needed to internally need to prove myself, my worth of being there, because I was always being rejected from a younger age. And I think that turned into people pleasing for me, in the sense of I said yes to everything that was presented to me, because internally I see it as an opportunity to prove myself, but an extent of wanting to be shown that I was good enough, because of that imposter syndrome of me saying, well, actually I shouldn't be here, so I need to do more to prove my worth of being here. And that did turn into quite a bit of burnout at one stage in leadership for me, because I was saying yes to, oh, can you take on this extra team member, or can you take on this extra work? And it was constantly saying yes, and then complaining that I was doing too much work. And I
Mm.
was doing too much work because I didn't understand my boundaries. I didn't understand my own professional boundaries of where I could say no, because I felt like I couldn't say no, and that's the people pleasing side of me. But then coming back to the RSD, the same as you, I internalize a lot of my RSD. So in the workplace, I didn't have those volcanic outbursts. But unfortunately, where I can mask, again, is at home and in my private life. And I would probably be internalizing all the RSD all day at work.
Yeah.
And then my husband or friend, whoever it may have been at that point I was living with or was with, would get the raft of that the minute they would criticise the smallest thing that I would have done at home.
Yeah. It's very similar for me. I mean, I was clever at school and I flunked university, but still that imposter syndrome and trying to prove myself at work. And before kids, I would do that by putting in loads of extra hours and always being obliging. And it was okay if I was there from 9 till 7. It didn't matter. I'd go home and eat and I'd be fine. I didn't have any other responsibilities. But as soon as I became a mother, I couldn't sustain that. So suddenly I was letting people down. And honestly, one time I remember there was a management reporting deadline for me in the job I had when I had Iggy. And it used to be the first Wednesday of every month or something. And he'd been sent home sick from nursery. And I literally went in at 5 o'clock when Martin got home and worked all evening. And I could barely see to drive home when at the end of the day when I'd met the deadline, because I got astigmatism anyway, but like I was so tired and burned out that I really wasn't safe to drive. And it's just that, to me, was so much more acceptable than not meeting a deadline and letting somebody down. But
Yeah.
there was nowhere to go. My time was divided between that full-time HR job where I was a one-man band. I was the only HR systems analyst. I had to do all the HRMI, no cover, but I also had a very needy, very sickly baby. So just that's the first time I ever experienced burnout to a really noticeable degree. And obviously I went to the doctor. I didn't know I was autistic. So they would just think that it's depression because it looks the same, responds to the same treatments, have a month off, have someone cover your work, and maybe do the self-care, maybe take SSRIs, which I did, and then you bounce back stronger. So yes, it was burnout, but it's going to look like depression.
And I think that's a really important point as well. Even if you're not a neurodivergent woman, that people pleasing, again, it's that acceptance of, you need to do better when you become a mother, of
Yeah.
you need to juggle that full time if you are in full time work or even part time work. The expectation on you is the same level of work, because let's be honest, the majority of the primary care does fall to the working mum. Okay,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that there isn't
I'm
father
lucky with Sky,
primary
actually.
care,
He does the lion's share of the childcare now, but yeah,
but
when I had Iggy, I was still in my first marriage, and uh, my first husband had a more senior job than me. So it's always like the nursery would call me first, and I was expected to take the time off. And I always had to fit in around him. He'd only be able to take the time off if he didn't have a deadline, didn't have an important meeting.
and I think that's a lot for a lot of families. And I remember, and it's a similar story to yours actually, Charlie, that I just landed my first leadership role, and I just had, and it wasn't my first leadership, it was my first leadership role since being back from maternity, because I'd done leadership roles in the past, then I went back to relationship management, and then I went back into leadership just after I'd had Louis, actually. So it wasn't when I had Harry, it was when I had Louis. And so I had two children under the age of 3 at home. I had Louis and Harry was 2. We just moved home, and Louis had gone into hospital to have his tonsils his anions and grommets fitted. So he had this huge operation at the age of 2, and I was still working full time, and I asked for time off, and they said, "Oh, okay. When he comes out of hospital, why don't you work from home?" I had my mum here as well. I was very, very grateful that my mum had been here. They said, "Well, why don't you come in the office if your mum's here?" And I said, "Because he's my son, and if he feels really poorly, he wants his mum, and I want to be here. It's not going to stop me from working." Anyway, I went back into work and I started getting these heavy migraines again, and I hadn't had them for years. And then this pain at the back of my neck, and it was so intense that I actually thought at one point that I had a brain tumor or something. It was that bad. And I was fortunate enough that I had private healthcare. And I went and had a brain scan, and he said, the tension in the back of your neck from stress is causing these migraines. And they all started fitting together. It's that this expectation of this new role, and having a sick child at home, and having to still do the same level of work, and I probably was doing more. It was just too much.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the hardest things you can go through as a perfectionist that's either a people pleaser or just wants to impress people with how much they can achieve all the time. I think I'm the latter. One of the hardest things you can go through is when you're multi-hatting and you're not wearing any of the hats straight. So you want to impress people at work in your career. You want to be a good mum, a good wife, and all of those things, and look good and not be overweight. And, you need your hair nicely highlighted and no greys and no wrinkles and makeup. And I could go on and on and on. But when you trying to do all those roles and you realize that you can't do any of them well because it's just too much for one person.
So the question that I've got for you then, and I think a lot of people ask themselves this question, or they may not, this may actually make people think about it, is how do you now tell the difference? Now you've had your diagnosis, how do you tell the difference between doing something from choice versus doing something of fear of letting someone down?
Yeah. So I'm quite good at sort of listening to my own internal reactions. I think this is from going through counselling and therapy, but I can kind of sit back and take stock and notice how I feel. It's an intention. You have to set an intention to do that. Otherwise, you can just plow on regardless and never check in with yourself. So things like going for a daily walk, it gives me that headspace to check in with myself. And if I've got something to do that fills me with dread and just keeps getting bumped down my list of priorities, chances are I don't actually want to do it. I just feel like I should, or there's someone that's counting on me to do it. And if it's something that I bounce out of bed in the morning excited about, which I often do, actually, more and more now I have ADHD meds as well as caffeine, then it is something I really want to do through choice.
Yeah. And I think as well, there's still always going to be, do you think there's always still that element of the fear of letting someone down and taking on too much when they put on you, because you don't want to say no?
Definitely. And especially at work, I think, because there's this constant need to prove ourselves, and more so if you started from imposter syndrome, or you feel less qualified than your peers, or you're from a disadvantaged social background or anything like that. So I'd always want to say yes to every request that comes in. And in my last job, I realized that actually I I can't do the things that I could do in my older job. And part of that is, I think, to do with menopause, brain fog, but also the system I was supporting was much more clunky and hard to extract the information I wanted from. But I had to kind of say, I had to admit to myself, I've set myself up to fail here. I'm trying to be all things to all people and trying to turn around every request, and actually it's too much. And outside of work, I'll do that in social groups as well. And like, I've had to extricate myself from so many HR Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups and things because I'm in there trying to give people advice all the time, and then I'll sit back and think, but why me? Why why is it up to me to solve this person's problem? And most of the time it isn't. So yeah, I've got a lot of close friends and a lot of acquaintances who I care deeply about as well, actually, and I'd like to be able to help them all, but it's not all on my shoulders. It shouldn't be anyway.
Do you think though sometimes that comes from the impulsiveness of ADHD, where you read something and you instantly want to respond to it, and then you don't think about the consequences of that response because then they start seeking more from
Yeah,
you? And I think
definitely.
that has a huge impact as well on the, because it then becomes, oh, now I can't say no.
Yeah. So this is one of the first things I learned in self-employment, that I need a really, really firm boundary around certain things. And I don't want people contacting me about suicidal teenage children they have, for example. I've realised that one really early on and set that boundary. But then I also had to, I was getting recommended to all kinds of people as being someone that understands neurodivergence and someone that's worked in HR. And yeah, great. That's my market position as a
Yeah,
speaker. But it doesn't mean that I want to solve everybody's individual employee relations issues for them. And if I try and do that and it doesn't go their way, it really impacts me as well. It can really drag me down.
yeah.
So I had to decide really early on, I'm not doing any one-to-one support. And that was hard because it made me feel like a heartless bitch.
No, not at all. Because, and I think again that comes from the diagnosis of, and also understanding yourself. Because if I look back, what if I knew what I knew now, I would have been I think I would have been different in some of the approaches that I made, and some of the decisions that I made would have been different. And would I have been more assertive in my boundaries? Probably yes, where I wasn't at all. And again, like that people pleasing,
I
a
didn't
lot of
have
people,
any boundaries. God,
people used to say, "So you look so confident," and inside I'd be screaming, "I'm really not confident at all." Um,
no.
and I don't know. I
But
suppose sometimes again it's that masking, isn't it? What part
I
of
was
me?
told I was confident, so I had to prove I was confident. I was told I was clever, so I had to prove it. It's I can't get my head around it, but it's like someone's already told me that. Why do I need to prove it to everybody else as well?
Have we got any questions for anyone who's watching live?
We haven't actually. We're definitely live, but if there's anyone watching live, they're being very, very quiet.
No, I've been very quiet. And I think as well, I think for anyone this may resonate with, unlearning this isn't about becoming careless or unkind. It's about learning that you don't have to earn rest, you don't have to earn safety, and you don't have to earn belonging. You're allowed to be human, and you're allowed to be enough without trying to prove it as well. I think more than anything, because it's exhausting from trying to be everything to everyone.
Definitely. Yeah, 100% agree. And I think this is a bit of a hot topic as well. I'm seeing there's pages and books being written about this topic. It's like unlearning the good girl trap. And uh, Bridget Hampstead from Fish in a Tree is writing a book about this at the moment. I've just seen her overview on Substack, and there's so many people are realizing, hang on, and especially we've got one comment actually, listening and resonating. Thanks from Georgina Smith. Yeah, thank you. When we realise that we're trying to be presentable and thin and sexy and everything as well, and to not say the wrong thing and to have the professional veneers and be a sympathetic ear and all of that stuff women are meant to be, as well as keeping all the plates spinning at home and at work. And even if the workload demands that are on us in a permanent job are too much for our ability to cope, And it's something's got to give, and it tends to be our mental health before
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to learn how to spot the early warning signs of burnout. And to me, it's volcanic behaviors, inflammatory emails, telling people exactly what I think, and that kind of thing. My mask starts to crumble, my social inhibition filters go down. If we can spot those and really check in with ourselves and work out what can go on the back burner, then we can start to put ourselves together. But that's kind of the acute way to deal with this. But there's a longer term issue in terms of, is it societal expectations on us, or is it, have we built this ourselves? And either way, how do we break free from it?
I think it's both. I think there's always been a social expectation on um, individuals professionally, on family, externally, whatever it may be. There's always an expectation on everybody, but it's what you do with that expectation, and it's about how do I set those boundaries in the right way that's right for me, but it's assertive enough that it doesn't impact anybody else. And again, it's about that self-care, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it's actually, if I have said yes to these projects, and I have said yes to this because I didn't want to miss out on the opportunity, and I do want to show that I'm good enough, where's the conversation of what I can drop?
yeah, yeah. Or
Where's gone?
change things so they're not in their peak workflow time at the same time. So I had to do that when, because there's no getting away from the annual projects when you work in HR systems and NI. There's always going to be the holiday carryover. There's always going to be the pay review. But if I was asked to do implementation projects at the same time, having gone through the diagnosis and learned about what pushes me past my ability to cope, I would be able to have that conversation about, I'm setting myself up to fail if I do these simultaneously. How about we do the pay review a month earlier or later and backdate it if necessary, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's never about being awkward, and it's always about setting yourself up to succeed.
And I would also say, if there's any leaders or line managers listening to this as well, is watch out for those who are constantly saying yes. To those who are always taking on that extra work, because to you, they're your golden ticket. They're your top performers. They're the ones that are doing all the extra work. But why are they taking on all the work? It could be the fact that they may have RSD and they take on all this work so they don't get criticism and they do continuously get praise. But
Yeah,
what you're seeing is the swan above the water. You're not seeing what's going on underneath. And
yeah,
it's that iceberg effect, isn't it? So I would say, check in with your team. For those who are high performing, are you all right? Is there something you can drop or you can take away? Because they won't always volunteer that information if they're feeling like that.
definitely. I totally agree. And actually, I once had an HR director before I knew I was autistic. And I overheard her once say, I have found that with certain people, and looking over in my direction, that if you pile on enough pressure, that they can pull rabbits out of hats at the last minute.
Yeah.
I've had another HR director who said to me, never mind what Charlotte Court can achieve. That was my first married name. What about Charlotte Wright, which is my maiden name? So basically saying that I'm not as good now that I'm married and have a kid as I was when I was working all those hours and just doing whatever I needed to do to get the job done.
Well, doing what you've been paid to do, right? The
Yeah,
hours you've been paid to do, and not all the other hours because you probably had more free time and because you may have enjoyed it back then. But
yeah,
priorities change, and I think everybody has a life outside of work.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we can't enjoy it if we're burned out.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I can't do anything creative if I'm in that space or anything. Can't focus on my favourite TV programs or anything.
No. So my one key message is be kind to yourself, being kind is not being rude.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Find out what will push you past your ability to cope, and you need to self-advocate to try and prevent that and set those boundaries. Set
Absolutely.
yourself up for success.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's 1:30 on the dot. Thank you for those who've listened live. Thank you for those who are listening on Spotify or and in the future maybe with a cup of tea. And we will see you again next month with another Natter topic.
Thank you.